we look at the difference between control when nobody's in the room and what happens when these post-material persons touch the device. And again, it was rock star. In science, there's what's called a probability that your findings are due to chance, random. And generally you need it's called a p-value of less than 0.01. Now that is that there's less than a 1 in 100 chance that your results are due to randomness, chance. Well, the results we've been getting have 6 zeros after the decimal point. So 0.00000 and then some number. These are off the chart. Dr. Schwartz is 75 years old, and he said that in his 50 years of doing research at these prestigious universities I mentioned, he has never seen data so clean, so beautiful.
Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. So we have a special guest tonight who is Dr. Mark Pitstick. Mark is the author of Soul Proof, the director of the Soul Phone Foundation. He is a clinical psychologist, holistic chiropractic physician, and one of the most prominent researchers in this field of life after death. So I think you're definitely going to learn a few things tonight from the show. So please welcome Dr. Mark Pitstick. Hey Mark, how you doing?
Doing great, Cyrus. Thank you.
Okay, so I kind of want to dive into things. I know you're pressed for time right now. So a lot of people who watch this show on YouTube have been following the work of the Soul Phone. We've talked about this in other episodes with different guests. And so while many people do know about this, let's go ahead and bring people up to speed who don't know about it. So I'm aware that there are 4 different technologies being worked on in relation to the Soul Phone. So can you talk a little bit about what the Soul Phone is and what these 4 different technologies are?
Sure. First of all, I'll be talking a lot about Dr. Gary Schwartz, former Harvard and tenured Yale professor, 21 years now at the University of Arizona as a senior professor there. And he went there because he wanted more latitude for the research he could do, which in this case was looking at survival of consciousness after bodily death. And he thought that perhaps the best way to tackle that would be looking at the issue of mediums. Do some mediums indeed have verifiable abilities to communicate with post-material persons? And quick sidebar, post-material person is a term we use for dead people, deceased, departed, spirits, because it turns out they're none of those. They're not dead, they're not spirits floating around like Casper the Friendly Ghost. They're just as physical as we, or can be. They can multilocate, they can be more aware of their parallel dimensions or multiplicity of how their energy manifests. And so we use the term post-material person to describe them more. Well, his research with a number of top mediums was shared in his book, The Afterlife Experiments. And indeed, he found about 20 who had rock star abilities, 86, 90% accuracy versus 23% for the control group. And like all the studies, these studies were very well done, controlled. He had videographers, other scientists observed, even magicians, and no one could find any trickery or any weakness in the methodology. Well, as a scientist, he had to go ahead and say, okay, my hypothesis that life does survive after bodily death has been strengthened by showing that at least these mediums are accurately able to communicate with post-material persons. So he moved ahead then with looking at, can we develop some technology to communicate with them, to make this available for the masses? Because there's only so many mediums that are really, really good. Some are mediocre, what I call medium mediums, and some are just crummy and shouldn't be pretending they're mediums. So we wanted something for everybody to use, not only to communicate with their loved ones who have passed on, but also with post-material luminaries, people who are geniuses while they're on Earth and could help us here with our biggest challenges. Well, synchronistically, a number of these mediums independently started telling Gary, hey, you know, Albert Einstein keeps coming to me and saying, you're supposed to put together some technology. So that was pretty nice validation of his feeling about where to go next. And 11 years ago then, he started in, and he has done to date 8 different experiments, methods to measure the presence of, quote, spirit. Just briefly, detecting their presence by visually, by auditory, hearing them, measuring their movement, their ability to show up as electromagnetic radiation, to greatly enhance that, to enter a triple darkened box and manifest their light there, to slow down the movement of photon beams, a number of different ways. None of those were commercializable. Then about 2.5 years ago, and I've been working with Dr. Schwartz for over 3.5 years now, moved toward what we call the soul switch. And that's the first device that Cyrus referred to. A switch is a binary device, kind of like the switch on the wall. In other words, it's on or it's off. Well, it was apparent that these, what I'll call the A-team members, and it's about 30 post-material persons, scientists, inventors, leaders, and other luminaries, were able to interact with this switch and to signal a yes or no answer. Now, I used to work in hospitals decades ago as a respiratory therapist, working with paralyzed people and people who are quadriplegic, paralyzed from the neck down, and even to the point where they couldn't talk. At least they could blink. 1 blink for yes, 2 blinks for no, or whatever the system was. And so I was aware of just how much communication can occur by a yes or no indicator. Well, indeed, we started with what's called the plasma globe system, and this was written up in a article that's about to be released in Explore. And if you visit our website, soulphone.org, and look at 2020 update, you'll see a link to that abstract, which describes in great detail his research with this plasma globe system and quantifying, showing the presence of spirit, their ability to answer yes or no. Now, we use several different tests for this. And the first, and I spent a lot of time in Arizona. I'm a research assistant, so I've been involved in this a lot. The first test was called cognitive understanding, because we couldn't assume that post-material persons still remember the English language. We couldn't assume that they remember the difference between a giraffe and a car. So we set up a test for this, much like the I am not a robot test. And so the test would say, is this a giraffe? Yes or no. Is this a car? Is this a plane? You know, is this a monkey? And their results were across the board accurate. So we knew more about that. Then we started what was called the personal identification test. And we had 4 different test pilots, and we don't talk much about them now in terms of their names and so on. People want to know about that a lot, but our stance is that we're going to let them speak for themselves very soon when they can, instead of sharing identities. So we came up with 12 questions. Is this your first name? Is this your last name? Was this your mother's name? Was this your father's name? Were you born in this city, etc.? And we've done 2 different experiments. When I say experiments, each experiment lasts almost a month, has 4 to 8 different subjects, over 1,000 different sessions. We also have what we call no participant control sessions for every one of these, where nothing is happening. So we look at the difference between control when nobody's in the room, and what happens when these post-material persons touch the device. And again, it was rock star. In science, there's what's called a probability that your findings are due to chance, random. And generally you need it's called a p-value of less than 0.01. And that is that there's less than a 1 in 100 chance that your results are due to randomness, chance. Well, the results we've been getting have 6 zeros after the decimal point. So 0.00000 and then some number. These are off the chart. I mean, Dr. Schwartz is 75 years old, and he said that in his 50 years of doing research at these prestigious universities I mentioned, he has never seen data so clean, so beautiful. And again, this has been replicated by other centers. We are getting ready to launch 4 different centers now. Cyrus referred to these multi-center studies. And that's the gold standard for showing then that this is a real event. So questions or comments about that before I go further, Cyrus?
Sure. I mean, I have a lot of questions. I think it's all very exciting. One question that's kind of in my mind is the relationship between this work and, for example, what people commonly call ITC. Do you guys use that acronym, or is this a whole different ballpark?
Yeah, it's a commonly asked question, and it's a big question. It's a big topic. So EVP, ITC, there's so much going on out there, and respectfully, there are a lot of people who say they've been doing research on it for 20, 30 years, but what that means is they've been working on it in their garage or in their basement or something. And again, this is not disrespect for some people. You know, that's all they can do. They're not associated with university. They don't have funds. But really, that's not considered valid research. And to be research, again, there has to be a control group. There has to be a control of possible confounding variables. There has to be replication by another lab. There's all sorts of requirements to be considered scientific research. And to our knowledge, no one else is doing this work except Dr. Schwartz at University of Arizona on this particular communication issue. So we talked about then the plasma globe switch, which is a device kind of like a packing box. It's about that size. Well, that's not commercializable. However, and to answer an initial question about the current status, we had several breakthroughs around the first of the year that have led now to working with the electronic soul switch. This device will be about 4 inches by 6 inches. An electrical engineer with 30 years experience and being a professor at Berkeley made some huge breakthroughs, as did Dr. Schwartz. And so that's what enabled this. We're starting now with the basic research on the electronic soul switch, and this should be commercializable. Not that people are going to want a yes-no switch, but the electronic soul switch, ESS for short, can then be converted once it's 99.9% reliable, instantaneous yes-no answers, accurate, into a soul keyboard. You know, if you're in front of a smart device, you see 40-some main keys. And likewise, these electronic soul switches can be arranged in series, making a keyboard that's going to be about 4 foot long, 3 foot wide in the beginning. But if post-material persons can touch a device to answer yes and no, then they can do that to type. Because, for example, when you push an L, excuse me, on your keyboard, that's a yes for an L and a no for everything else. So they'll be able to at least hunt and peck and type text with us. There might be more elegant solutions for that on their side. The word is that they are working on their side just as hard and much as we are working here to enable this, because texting and typing will, number one, allow much better communication with our post-material loved ones, and just think how much comfort, inspiration, reassurance that is. But number two, with these luminaries I mentioned, who stand ready to help us with our toughest problems. So this is huge beyond measure.
And I have kind of what is kind of for me $1 million question, and it concerns how the technology operates, because in my research, I've come to find that very often when there is a communication happening through an electronic means, there is sometimes maybe even only a little bit of power being drawn from the user of the device. So sometimes it's a joint effort between the other side and someone's own almost mediumistic ability. And then this somehow translates into a message appearing on a computer or a message appearing on a phone. So my question for you is, does this technology work independently of the user, or does it have to sort of use the user's energy or the user's mediumistic abilities, or depend upon the abilities of those on the other side? Or does it work entirely like independently of that? Like anyone could theoretically pick it up and begin receiving messages.
I understand the question. And it's a great question. And it's the question of what's called experimenter bias. And Dr. Schwartz addressed this very early on by setting up experiments where there were no humans at all in the lab. The experiments would be started with a random time generator from the computer. Again, when nobody else is in the lab, Dr. Schwartz and the other principals would be asleep and didn't know when it would start, and the results were the same. So there is no need for a human person's energy to make this work, nor do we expect that to be the case. In other words, these will be very much like any smart device. You know, you pick up a cell phone, no matter who you are, no matter if your energy is really evolved or really primitive, it works. You can make calls and everything else with it. Well, likewise with these. And right now, in fact, he's playing, Dr. Schwartz is such a genius. When he's not working really hard, he likes to play at things like this. One of the controls we did in the past was, in addition to what we call no participant control, nobody's in the room, we also looked at what was the effect of a human on the technology. So a person, and usually it was me or his wife, Rhonda, would touch the device, and so we'd see no participant control. This is kind of like the x-axis, like a flatline EEG or EKG, nothing. Then a human would touch it, and the light, the energy, the graphs would be really high. And then a post-material person would touch it, and it would be something like this in comparison with a human. Even so, it wasn't just the human putting their hand on the device, because the human's body was there with it, their electromagnetic field. You may have seen research that, for example, there's electromagnetic field emitted by the heart that can extend 10, 20 feet out, same way with the brain. And so what Dr. Schwartz did was buy a robotic arm, a little robotic, it's got a platform and an arm that holds a plastic or other material hand. And so now, instead of seeing what is the effect when a human touches it, we have the lab, everything's controlled remotely, no one is in there. The robotic arm, which is always present there, so it's not a variable, it's there whether it's no participant control, the robotic arm test, or the post-material person. But in the robotic hand test, it then puts the hand on top of the device and touches that. So He has been working on this for a long time. He has a team of what he calls devil's advocates, top scientists who have looked at this all along, and nobody can find any weaknesses with it. And that is true even for those scientists who are atheists. And they say, Gary, you know, we know you, we know your reputation, we've looked this forward and backward. It all looks great. There's only one problem. We don't believe in an afterlife, you know, so we think there has to be something wrong here.
Yeah, it's a fun fallacy to deal with when you go, you know, when you're dealing with people like that, and then they say, well, look, all the data matches, but it doesn't match what I personally believe in, so there must be some undiscovered error that we can fight about. But okay, so you mentioned that other universities may be replicating the work being done. Personally, I feel like I went to University of Arizona, and even back when I was a freshman back then, it was still the U of A was the place for this research. Actually, my buddy was Schwartz's lab assistant way back then. So this is back in 2005. But I remember all the way back from then, like it was always the U of A. And now, you know, so many years later, it's still the U of A and Dr. Schwartz and yourself and others. Is there any hope that someday we may be looking at a dozen other universities doing the same types of work? Do you foresee this happening?
Oh, there's more than hope. It's already into the works. I had a big Zoom meeting this week with a senior professor at a prestigious university. We're not ready to name it, but they are on board. They're just ready and super excited to be probably the third institution. The first two are lined up, a well-known scientific laboratory and also a top scientist who's doing it in his own laboratory. So yeah, we have, and then the fourth person, because we want to do some of these, not just in university settings, but also clinical settings. The fourth one, we have a physician and who's also a physicist, and he has a laboratory, and he'll be the fourth. So the nice thing about Dr. Schwartz, having been a professor at Harvard and Yale so long ago, is that he has lots of previous students who are now department heads. So there'll be no shortage of places around the world who want to test. The typical gold standard for multicenter studies is about 5. For example, for pharmaceutical drugs, Dr. Schwartz wants to do 8 or 10 just because of the nature of this topic. You know, we have to go above and beyond the usual, given the skepticism that there is any life after death.
Has there been any recent breakthroughs between yourself and Schwartz that have happened, you know, recently that maybe you want to share with us?
Well, the work on the electronic soul switch, the preparation, we're buying the equipment now for the multicenter studies. Those are the latest breakthroughs. You can't get any more recent than that. That's what's happening right now.
And I want to take a moment to clear up with yourself some possible misconceptions about this work. So I've heard people basically speak of this just in reference to the soul switch, and then they'll say things like, well, we already have, like, you can buy these ghost meters, you know, and it's the same thing, and so why is this being such a big deal when, you know, we can get these little blinking diodes over at the paranormal Amazon store, right? And so what I usually will say is that this area is a lot more than just what you're thinking. This is a wide-scale research project being done formally through academic means, and it encompasses a whole heck of a lot, and you really have to read books like from yourself or by Dr. Gary Schwartz to understand the full scope of it and why a huge budget is required to pull this research off. Now, does that answer make sense to you, and is that a proper response to kind of clarify some of the possible misconceptions?
Yeah, here's how I would answer it, Sarah. Is let's look at three different, because there are so many devices out there. Let's look at three major types. One is that some sort of light or beep occurs that suggests that there has been contact with a spirit being. And the questions are what I mentioned earlier. Okay, are there controls? In other words, is this device sitting in a room being recorded when no one is asking for any contact? And do some beeps or lights occur during that time? In other words, is there a statistical significance occurring in these beeps or lights when the researcher or the person working with it asks for an interaction? Number one. Also, what about the experimenter's effect? As we discussed earlier, does this same frequency happen no matter who is interacting, or does it have something to do with the experimenter's energies, expectations, etc.? Another type of device would be one that purportedly creates words, sounds, and again, I'm not being critical. Anybody doing this research, we support it because it's needed so much. However, this area is also so there are so many critics and skeptics already that the research should be well done. Dr. Schwartz has offered several top IVP and EVP quote researchers to work with them, to help them to do this in a truly scientific way, and no one has taken him up on it. So the ones, the EVP tapes we've heard are unintelligible. And that's why there's a subcaption underneath. Johnny said, "I love you, Mom," and I work with a lot of bereaved parents. I was on the board of helping parents heal for 5 years. So that's an area that's near and dear to my heart and never keep thinking about it. But that's an emotional appeal to a bereaved parent, when really you listen to it, and it also could sound like blah, 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 blah. So that's a lot of the EVP to me. And then the ITC, for me, it's more video, blurry images. And it's like, people send these to me. "Oh, do you see the face in here?" I'm like, I was trained as a clinical psychologist years ago to do Rorschach tests. And you could look at this image, and I bet if you get 100 different people, you're going to get 100 different images. Yeah, it kind of looks like a horse head. That looks like a tree. So to say, yeah, see right there, there's a face, it's very, very subjective. So again, I encourage any researchers out there to get in contact with a university in your area and start applying proven scientific principles if you think you really have something going.
And I think it would also depend a little bit on the stamina, if you want to use that term, or the how motivated they are on the spirit team to want to work with somebody to create a long-term relationship, because this is how it's happened with Schwartz, with, like you said, these post-material luminaries, people you've mentioned like Einstein, and they're all kind of working from that side to help facilitate all of this. Is it possible for somebody who is working out of their garage, like you said earlier, to be able to still have a lot of results, even if they don't have Einstein behind the scenes, or an alleged Einstein helping keep the thing going?
That's a question I can't really answer. First of all, we asked the question of these different, David Bohm, who is a Princeton mathematician and quantum physicist, a colleague of Einstein, Edison, top names like this, and we say, why us? And they said, because no other scientists are working on this. So that's the first answer. As far as other people working on it, though, our impression is that those in the post-material world are very, very motivated to help those of us on Earth. And so they are willing to work with serious-minded people who really care. And as far as wasting their time, there's also some evidence, again, a lot of it through these evidential mediums, that they can multilocate, they can perhaps be in 50 or more places at a time doing different things. So Edison or Einstein could indeed be working with us and some of these other people making those claims.
Yeah, and that's interesting how areas kind of converge, because like that was one of the things my mom was communicating to me after she passed away. She said there's some things, Cyrus, that I can't even really properly describe to you because you wouldn't have the dimensional consciousness to be able to understand it. I'm like, what? She's like, well, I can be in multiple places at once. I'm like, well, how many places can you be? She says, I currently am able to be in 4 places at once. And I said, well, Mom, I think I can maybe figure that out. You can go ahead and try to tell me those things, and it's my job. I'm going to try to figure out what you're talking about. So it is interesting. There is that convergence of data, basically, when you even someone who is just privately communicating with that side, and then you have through like scientific means, you're getting similar things. So I'm going to hit you with one more question here, and then since I know you're a bit pressed for time, then I'll see if any of the patrons in the audience want to ask you anything. So I want to ask you, so in your opinion, what's going to get sort of the paradigm to change? So what is the right combination of scientific breakthrough and maybe media coverage, maybe academic work that could finally push this whole thing home? Because those of us who are involved in this world, I mean, we know it's as real as gravity or, stepping outside and feeling the sunlight. We know it's there. We know it's real. What could possibly add an inch to a mainstream global acceptance, in your opinion? I mean, just spitballing.
Again, I applaud you on your questions. It's obvious you love this area. You've been involved in it. You've done your homework. So good job. Yeah, this is the kind of thing we discuss every week. And as a serious scientist, Dr. Schwartz won't make an official announcement until the multi-center studies are finished. We have one scientist who has a billionaire benefactor who has committed to funding the entire project. And I'm talking about to the point where this is the sole voice, being able to talk clearly, accurately, reliably with post-material persons, and then sole video, being able to see. So it could be that once we have the multi-center study, then we have the funds in place for the staff, the equipment, and start producing these devices. We are going to have our first demonstrations at the beginning of 2021, probably virtual now, since more people will be meeting this way. But the beauty of it is that people online can attend and observe what I just mentioned. At that point, we should have the electronic switch, and we will invite members of the media to this and demonstrate no participant control, the robotic hand, and then what happens when a post-material person touches it. We also have a ethics committee who is starting to work on this, directed by Professor Tom Plant, one of the world's premier ethicists. And so we are looking at discussions with leaders of each religion and philosophy, because we want to be proactive on this. We don't want them having to react to it. We want to invite them into the dialogue and say, we respect your tradition. Even though there are a lot of different beliefs out there, they each have some core golden threads to them. And we would like to work with you. We would like to see, what do you think the response of your denomination or religion would be to this? How can we communicate these with your people? So we're doing all sorts of foundational work right now to prepare people for that paradigm shift. The other thing is what we call greater reality living groups, which we form some around the country, primarily Canada, US, UK, but also online meetings coming up where people can gather and learn the evidence. And there's so much evidence now, both clinical and scientific, that clearly shows life continues after bodily death. How can they internalize that great news, not just know it intellectually, but really know it so that it prepares them no matter what happens? For example, Gandhi, he was shot in the abdomen 4 times. And as he was dying, he was reciting the name of God, Ram, Ram. And there are other people like that who have demonstrated that no matter what you're going through, when you know you're one with the one and part of source, that's what many people who have near-death experiences say, then what can go wrong? And this is reflected, for example, in Christian teachings. If God is for you, who can be against you? Native American teachings, for example, a big part of my teaching in the past, they say, every day is a walk in the woods with Great Spirit. Given that, what can go wrong? If you lose an arm or a leg or you get killed, you're walking with Great Spirit always, whether on earth or elsewhere. So the more people get this, then the more they're able to make their lives a work of art, and they're able to brighten the corner where they are.
Yeah, it will be a major disclosure series of events when things unfold the way that you're describing. And it really gives me a lot of hope hearing words like billionaire donors. I think that's exactly what's needed in this area, because, I mean, the tentacles of the materialist establishment, I mean, there's more than a few billionaires in that in that category. And there has to be some strength behind this movement. And I think, for people who know about these topics, I mean, I can imagine it should be a very passionate thing. And yet, the materialist tentacles, they can also be very, very powerful as well. And so there's a little bit of a, like a push between these competing areas. I'm sure we could probably talk a lot about that, but I know you're a bit pressed for time, so I'm going to go ahead and real quick say thank you to the people on YouTube watching this. I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Dr. Mark Pitstick. Please go down, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share this if you'd like other people to hear this message. If you want to become a patron yourself and join these behind-the-scenes interviews, then you can sign up at patreon.com/afterlife topics to come join the roundtable discussions with us here, so that lots of people don't start talking at once. For anybody who has a question for Dr. Pitstick, I'm going to ask you to either raise your hand and wave at the camera, write something in the chat box, or use the actual Zoom hand-raising tool. Then I'll just call you out. So go ahead and do that if you have a question. Corey, okay, I see your hand up. What's up? By the way, Corey, I can only see your top of your head. Okay, there you are.
Yeah, I'm moving it down. Are the individuals that have the post-material individuals, I got to get this right, are they directing you guys? I mean, in other words, are they smarter now being in their position? They have more answers or better answers, and they're trying to direct you guys to be able to create this technology? Or are both sides the same and they're just trying to figure this out still?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a good one. And isn't it exciting to even think about this sort of thing? Well, first of all, people on the A team were geniuses while they're on Earth, the top of their fields. But now they enjoy an unobstructed view of the universe. Eben Alexander and I had dinner a while back, and we're talking about, from mine as a doctor of chiropractic, from his as a neurosurgeon, both of our understandings of the central nervous system being primarily inhibitory, meaning it filters out sensory input. Because if we could hear, for example, every radio show going through the air, we couldn't function, we couldn't hear. So a lot of what our brains do is filter out all these different sights and sounds and so on, so that we can just focus on what is most important for us to function on Earth. Well, post-material persons no longer need that. They no longer have that filtration system. And so they're able then to perceive more of the greater reality, which means being aware of the various information and energy that's stored and is available to them. So yes, they have a greatly enhanced perspective. Their earlier genius, wisdom, skills are enhanced. Plus, they continue to work. In one meeting with a medium, and we discussed this in the book Dr. Schwartz and I wrote called Greater Reality Living, Nikola Tesla was involved. And he said, we were asking if they would be able and willing to give webinars once we have even the soul keyboard. And the medium started laughing, and she said, they're pushing each other out of the way to get first in line. And Tesla said, if you think I invented some cool things while I was on Earth, wait till you see what I've been working on here. So that's the other thing. They're working, can you imagine the laboratory facilities in the field of all possibilities?
Yeah, it seems like if you guys can get that keyboard working, that full keyboard working, where you can really type out a sentence, if their technology is so advanced, ours will quickly advance. Should it be allowed, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, and that's one of our assumptions, that when we run into dead ends or delays, we say, maybe there's something we're not looking at. Maybe humanity is not quite ready yet. So we certainly respect that, and our feeling is now this will unfold in the right time, in the right way, with the right people.
Do we have any more questions for Dr. Pitstick? Go ahead and raise your hand. Do it on the Zoom platform. Send something in chat, or just raise your hand on the screen, and I'll try to call you up. Anybody? I'm looking around. Okay. People being bashful. Barbara, was that your hand raised? No, I'm sorry. I think you were just moving. Barbara, you're on mute.
Sunday.
No, I'm listening intently.
Oh, okay, I thought your hand was up. My bad. Okay, if anyone has a question, just jump in and ask.
Hi, Mark. It's Sunday.
Hi, Cindy.
Hey, I don't know if this is so much of a question, more like a statement. It's amazing to me that it appears as if the spirit world is evolving along with us. Say, a lot of people believe that we've been reincarnated, that we've lived prior lives, and technology 200 years ago, no spirits have been communicating scientifically, electronically, the way you have discovered, you and Dr. Schwartz, because we didn't have the technology to receive that, which is interesting. And now that we also have more technology over the years to receive it, they are able to communicate. So to me, it always seemed like when I've read near-death experiences, people would say, I knew everything. Every question I ever had was answered. And then when I returned to my body, I forgot it all. But it's so interesting to me that they're struggling, figuring it out, growing, just like we are. I had always thought that there'd be the source, God. Here you have access to everything, all information, all materials. So I just find that really interesting to me, that it's still an evolving type of experience.
Yeah, let me comment on two parts of that, Cindy, and thank you. One is that, as you say, with this technology, post-material persons have a greatly amped up ability to communicate with us. Keep in mind, it wasn't so long ago that mediums could be burned at the stake as witches, so they certainly didn't advertise themselves or give webinars like they can now. So two things have changed there in terms of communication capabilities. And then the second is, and I lost it. Whatever your second point, remind me again what you're saying at the end.
Oh, that the source, it seems like we're all evolving together, and that the source, God, whatever you call it, wouldn't be,
Got it, yeah. The post-material persons struggle and are still learning and are still working. Yeah, there are some schools of thought that when you die, everything is love and light and enlightenment and so on. Well, let's see, how would that be fair? So here's Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler getting ready to pass on. And they're both going to be the same, fully enlightened and realized masters when they pass. So no, the various snippets from different areas suggest that the best indicator of what an afterlife experience will be, the quality of it, is what was the quality of consciousness just before passing. You know, the old saying, you can't take it with you. Well, one difference is you take with you your degree of awareness, love.
And I think longtime viewers of this show will probably have a nice little chuckle hearing the Hitler comparison, because I sometimes go on and on about the point you just made, because there's some people in this field who literally say Hitler is an angel floating in heaven and the Holocaust was a gift from the angelic realm to help us learn. There's all this kind of hogwash. And what I've learned personally from communications with the other side is they are still evolving, growing people who, for one thing, there's consequences for actions. I mean, it's the basis behind the concept of karma. And when it comes to how you can have an all-encompassing consciousness experience during an NDE, I think one possible answer is how here on this world, people who are very prominent in meditation and having consciousness experiences here can have experiences where they feel like they're connected to the universe and they have all the answers. But then when the experience is over, they're back in their body and, they still have to, wake up in the morning and, buy underwear at Walmart. So it's kind of like, we can expand to that macro level, but then we go back down at the micro level again. I think that might relate to other realms as well. Those are just my thoughts. I don't know if Mark, if you have any ideas. I know you have to go. Barbara, your hand is up, so I'm going to let you be the last comment, and okay. then I'll turn it back to Mark.
All right. My question is, I wonder, Mark, if you could talk a little bit about greater reality living and the preparation that you have foreseen needs to be done while we're still here in order to be more enlightened in the next dimension.
Well, that's a weekend course, isn't it? But I will just say there's lots of information about that on our website, greaterrealityliving.com, that addresses, and full disclosure, both Barbara and Sunday have been involved in our organization in the past. So, yeah, we have articles, we have pages that outline some of the steps a person can take to really let this information sink in so that they not only know it, but they show it. And we spoke about this some earlier. No matter what's going on, you have cancer, you have a child that passes. Some of the most enlightened and most impressed people I know are bereaved parents. And we have a saying in helping parents heal: when a child passes or any other big challenge in life, it can make you better or it can make you bitter. And it's a fork in the road. It's a moment-to-moment choice. So these very inspirational parents I mentioned, who we call shining light parents, and that was a Suzanne Giesemann term, they have consciously chosen to find the meaning in this horrible event, to everyday work, to serve others, to create more meaning for their child's passing. And in the process, they become some of the most happy, funny, loving, impactful people I've met. And I include Barbara in that group, certainly.
Wow.
And two other quick comments, Cyrus, on what you mentioned before. Some of the best evidence for our degree of consciousness after we pass being affected very much by what it's like before we pass comes from the near-death experience literature, particularly from life reviews. And so somebody like Hitler we mentioned, in a life review, you have a review of what you said and did, your thoughts, words, and deeds, but you not only see it, you feel it. And this has been widely reported by different cultures across millennia. And so someone like Hitler would go through a temporary hell, and by temporary, it could be thousands of years, as he had his life review and not only saw but felt all the pain, all the repercussions that he created. However, you mentioned something about contrast souls, and I think there's some good evidence for it. It's just my understanding that, so for example, an abusive parent may really be a soulmate, and I use that term like Michael Newton did, that most of us have 25 or 30. So that abusive parent could actually be a soulmate who is helping you grow, giving you an opportunity to grow and evolve in ways you may not if you had a perfect life. However, it's my understanding of the universe, at least my feeling, that contrast souls wouldn't result in tens of millions of deaths and suffering like what happened with Hitler.
And I don't even think it would result in something truly horrific, like the kind of the kinds of abuse I can't even talk about on this channel, without probably getting squelched by YouTube. But really, really bad stuff. I think if we're talking about like a contrasting soul, I almost even think about like my parents who passed away, like my father. I mean, he was definitely a massive contrast to me and a massive challenge, but he never abused me. And so, I mean, I would almost think of it along those terms, because we don't want to, like, in my opinion, this is just, my editorial, somebody who has been through like extreme horrific abuse, and then they get told, oh, this was just, this was meant to be because of yada, yada. And I don't, of course, I don't buy that. But if it's somebody who you really are learning from, then you'll know that it really is, like you said, some kind of a soulmate and an arrangement like that. But that's just my feeling. If you want to comment on that, that's cool. I know you need to get out of here, so I will ask you what people can do to get in touch with you or to get involved with the Soul Phone organization and all of that. So you're welcome to comment on what I just said, and also if you need to get out of here, you can let everybody know where to go, and then we can kind of leave it at that.
Yeah. The topic of contrast souls is a huge one in a show in itself. Yeah, unfortunately, even though most people are isolated and binge watching or whatever, my long to-do list continues as director of the Soul Phone Foundation, helping Dr. Schwartz, etc. So yeah, I got to watch my time. I would just say that for you all and listeners, just know two things that are scientifically unquestionable right now. Number one, 99% of who you are continues after your body dies. So take that to heart and release any fear and worry. And secondly, it's been well established that post-material persons can communicate with us, which means you can communicate with your dear ones now. And that's why I created the facilitated after-death contact session. It's discussed in article number 9 at my website, soulproof.com. And at that same website, 60-some free articles that discuss the biggest challenges and questions you have, when a loved one's body dies by suicide, when a beloved pet's body dies, etc. So these free articles, free radio shows, under the radio show top tab, again at soulproof.com, where I interviewed people like Raymond Moody, Michael Newton, Brian Weiss, Wayne Dyer, and others, and asked them a lot of these questions we're talking about. So all that is there to enjoy and share with others. So hopefully we can all relax a notch, enjoy the ride. Remember that this is an adventure. As eternal beings, we like to have adventures, and aren't we all having an adventure now? And also know that you have everything within you need to handle this with style. So been great getting together with you, and we'll see you another time and place.
Thank you, Mark. It was great to have you on, and great to give everybody also a dose of the hard science and how the hard science is backing this field more and more. That's really the message I want to get out there. So thank you so much. And people watching, you guys get involved at afterlifetopics.com. You can stop by the Facebook group. It seems with the global crisis happening, it's gotten everybody thinking about this stuff. The number of people joining the Facebook group has about tripled, so like 200 to 300 people a week now signing up. So makes sense to me, right, given the circumstances. And so it's also a great time to get involved and join in. So with that being said, I will say goodbye to Mark, and I will see you guys on the next video.